Back then, the internet wasn't a thing. I don't think we even had the internet in our house back then. It wasn't so easy to just like go on Google and go, why do I feel like there are people in my head? That wasn't something you could do. So we didn't really know what it was or have a name for it. We just knew that there was more than one person in our minds.
Okay, we are on. Welcome back today with my guest Antares on I'm Told for This Shit podcast. I'm Angie and, well, I'm told to take any kind of shit now. If you haven't heard about me, I'm Angie and the founder of angies.com. That's angie-s.com. Link in the show notes. Well, I'm a health and skincare consultant. I help women who don't fit into the extremes implement healthier habits that don't manage them. I'm about tips and tricks that work, make sense, and just help you stay on top of it without making you bored to tears. We're talking what you eat, put on your skin, and do to feel your best. And because we're all so freaking busy, I always do my best to keep it fun and irreverent. I created this podcast because I wanted to talk about well-being beyond food, skincare, and meditation. I wanted to have guests on who can share their wisdom on relationships, sex, dating, owning a business, mental health, and basically all of these things that I am also excited and curious about, but have also experienced the ups and downs of, which most of us have. So I truly hope that you find this useful and helpful. So today we are talking about mental health. Now this is a topic that's really close to my heart, and the reason why I chose Antares is because he just blew my mind. He is so open about having dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder. And his story is one that's empowering. And I find that a lot of the time what I've struggled with, and I've not struggled with D.I.D. I've had depression, anxiety, and that kind of stuff, but not D.I.D. But even then, I have found it very, very challenging to open up about it to people because of fear of their judgment, the shame I felt. And so, I've come a long way since the day of, I don't know if I should do a Brené Brown and call it spiritual awakening, but the fucking breakdown. So a lot of things have changed for me. It's changed a lot of my perception on the world, and it has actually been a gift. But this isn't about me. This is about Antares and his story, and really, really hope that you can find some inspiration in this episode. It has definitely touched me quite deeply speaking with Antares, and I'm still, my mind is still blown, basically, at how, I hate using the word brave and courageous because I find it so patronizing, but fact, man, really, really he is. So this introduction is actually going to be a bit different than the other episodes because it requires some explanations so that because I want to make sure that you follow everything and that you don't get lost in some of the terms. So it's really easy and it's going to be very quick. So here it is. Today, we are talking about D.I.D, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. Someone with D.I.D experiences themselves as a bunch of people. And today, I'm specifically talking with Antares, who has D.I.D. They asked me to remove their birth name from the interview, but they have allowed me to say that they were born female, in a female body, and had a female birth name. The reason why I mentioned this will make a lot more sense during the interview. So, hey, a little disclaimer is needed. This episode is not to minimize what others can experience with D.I.D, such as harming each other. But today, we are going from Antares' own experience, which is an empowering one, and why I chose to speak with him. So he is also the first person with D.I.D that I have, to my knowledge, ever spoken with. So here are some terms that you will hear. System. A system refers to the collective of people that live within one body. Another one is driving the car. Driving the car is the person communicating with the outside world and being in charge at that moment in time. So in this episode, Antares is driving that car. Now, certain topics were a no-go zone, which I respected. But other than that, I asked away. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And without further ado, hi, Antares. How are you?
Hey, Angie. I'm good. Thanks for talking to me today.
No, I've really been looking forward to the chat today with you. So thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
So as you know, like one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as a guest is because I love how you broke the mold on how mental health is perceived and how you tackled hardship in your own life. Even despite when you couldn't get help with your D.I.D, and you turned it into your advantage, over time. Instead of like feeling alone, you actually, like, I know this is not your words, but in my words would be like, you sort of project manage your own team of people. With that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what you do, and then we'll go into what D.I.D is in a little bit.
Okay, well, I'm Antares, and as you've explained, I'm kind of representing Team Tristan today because we do experience ourselves as different people. Collectively, we do some copywriting, but mostly we just like to help people figure out like their strengths and their superpowers and how to embrace that and use it rather than running away from it. Almost like seeing their past as the source of their power instead of something to be afraid of, because it helps people feel just that much more confident in their business and I hope in their life.
Okay, so that's what you help people in their own business to be more of themselves, inclusive of their past. Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so I've been saying D.I.D, but so for those who don't know, it's dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called back in the day like multiple personality disorder. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's been sort of renamed as dissociative identity disorder. And so for the purpose of this interview, we will call it D.I.D. But can you tell us what it is? What is D.I.D?
Okay, D.I.D is a dissociative condition, which I guess the name kind of gave that away. It's caused when somebody goes through severe trauma before the age of 8, usually 7 or 8. Instead of as a child, the different kind of, I guess, parts of yourself will kind of form into like one cohesive personality as you get older and you get more of a sense of who you are. With D.I.D, that cohesion doesn't really happen. So instead of developing like one personality, you sort of develop, I guess, a different bunch of them. There are lots of ways that it can present. There's lots of myths surrounding it, which I guess you might tackle some of those today. But essentially, it's having a bunch of people in one mind.
Okay. And how do you know that they... So, I'm going to play like devil's advocate here, but how do you know that they are people rather than thoughts or, for example, OCD, which I know is called like obsessive compulsive disorder, but I call it obsessive compulsive thinking, which are not voices, but they're thoughts that are very controlling. So how do you discern, like, how do you know it's people versus thoughts or OCD?
That's a really interesting question. I can really only answer of how we know, because different systems, which is just like a word for somebody with D.I.D, they will often call themselves a system. They often discover it and discover each other as people in very different ways. For us, the way that we know is we always kind of like to say, I think, therefore I am, because when I'm here, I know that I'm Antares and I know what my opinions are. I know what my feelings are. I know what my interests are. I know what my temperament is. And then, like later in the day, we might switch and Quilo might be here and he will know who he is. He will have a different temperament than me, different feelings than me, different likes and dislikes than me. So I don't think it's that different to how people without D.I.D experience themselves. It's just that there's more of us doing it in the same brain, if that makes sense.
So yes and no. So for example, when you say, so now I'm speaking with Antares, and then you mentioned, was it Quila?
Quilo, yeah.
Quila, okay. And so Quila, you said he, so that's a man, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so when Quila is there, does that mean that Antares isn't there anymore?
Yes, essentially. I'm not his. I think like a really good analogy for it is to think of a car with different drivers. Later on in the day, I will stop driving. I will either just get out of the car altogether or I'll just get in the passenger seat and somebody else can drive for a while.
So who has like the consciousness? Like, who, because to me, so for example, if I was to think, so I have Angela
That's like, because you mentioned the system before, right? So system, so some people with D.I.D say that they call it a system. So a system is a group of people.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So my system is Angela, right? And then obviously I have a fantasy of who Angela could be, right? Or like alternative lives. But like, I know those are my aspirations or just daydreaming, right? But so if I was to say that Angela is not driving the car anymore, to me, that would be the same as having a blackout. But obviously, this is not what you're saying.
It sort of depends a little bit. Some systems do experience blackouts. It's really common. We do experience them as well, but I think because we've put like a lot of effort and a lot of time into learning to communicate and learning to work together, we don't really think of it as a blackout. I guess technically it is because, you know, after you do this interview, say Auden, I'm going to pick something different than Quillan this time. I put him in the spotlight already. If Auden comes here later, he's not going to remember that we did this interview. He's not going to be like, oh, I remember talking to Angie, because he won't, because he wasn't here for it. But I'll be able to tell him about it. So I guess it is a blackout, but we don't really tend to think of it that way because we're so used to it. It's just kind of become normal to us.
Yeah. So, and because now obviously that's a very clear distinction between what you're experiencing and what I just mentioned about thoughts or daydreaming. It's completely different world. It's completely different. It's clear that it's not, you know, what I was saying before about daydreaming or thinking or alternative sort of like lifestyle I could be having, you know, like if you dream about like the beach lifestyle and you like picturing yourself there. This is very different. So I just wanted to thank you for answering that, because I just wanted to make it very clear to people like how you're experiencing this, because it's a very different situation than daydreaming or anything else like that. So now, because of our previous conversation, you just mentioned about, you know, how you don't experience it as a blackout because you're so good at communicating with each other within your system. And so I know that from when we spoke earlier, it's like we talked about like you having almost like a handover between each other.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, that's something that we actually started doing when we started running our business. I know that's something we might talk about later, but we kind of realized really quickly that if we didn't start doing handovers with each other, it was going to be kind of a disaster because, you know, if you're kind of exiting and you need somebody to know that you've like done some work for a client or something like that, you want to really be sure that message gets passed across, or obviously you could miss a deadline and then that would not help your professional career. So that kind of taught us to do that in our professional life, but then we just carried it into our personal life as well, which is really useful. We try to make a point of, you know, if you're leaving and someone else is coming in, just leave them a note, you know, send them an email, leave them a note on the phone, just make sure they know anything they need to know before you leave.
So you all share an inbox and you share the same phone?
Yes, we didn't used to. We did used to have separate emails, but, you know, we still only have one brain and one set of hands. So it got really complicated, like signing in and out of like 10 email accounts every day. So now we just share.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's okay. Yeah. So you mentioned something just now about, you know, how the handover sort of came about, and how obviously if you don't talk to each other and communicate via leaving each other messages on the phone or emails, it can get quickly gets out of control or just, you know, a bit messy, right?
Yeah.
So you set this in place, right, as an adult. So this gets me thinking, when you were a kid, you didn't have this maturity yet or this awareness of that yet. So when did you realize, like, how did you realize something was up? Like, how did you know something was different?
I think that's, I think you would kind of get a different answer depending which one of us you asked that question to, because we had slightly different experiences of how and when we learned about it. For me personally, I think we must have been around maybe kind of 9 or 10-ish. I don't know exactly, because obviously, you know, when you're younger, everything's a little blurrier. But I just sort of became aware that Tristan, who, as you know, our collective name is Tristan. He's like one of our main headmates. I just became aware that he existed. I can't really think of a better way to describe it than that. I just had this sort of growing awareness that I wasn't alone, which sounds really, really scary, but it wasn't as scary as it sounds. It was more a case of, now I have to kind of try and communicate to this person that I'm here, because I sort of realized that he didn't know that. I think he would have been having like blackouts and things and not knowing why that was. So I just kind of gradually tried to talk to him. I think for him it was scarier because for him it was like, am I crazy? There's this voice trying to talk to me, this kind of like other presence. So it was a really strange experience from his perspective, I think. And it took a good few years, but when we were around 13 or 14, I don't know what changed, but something kind of just shifted and he kind of heard me and became a lot more aware of me. And from that point on, it was like, oh, okay, there's more than one person here. And, back then the internet wasn't a thing. I don't think we even had the internet in our house back then. It wasn't so easy to just like go on Google and go, why do I feel like there are people in my head? That wasn't something you could do. So we didn't really know what it was or have a name for it. We just knew that there was more than one person in our minds.
And so when you mentioned Tristan as being how did you mention him, like the headmaster?
No, I said he's one of our main headmates, although he might love that. Like, I will tell him about that after this.
So, would you say Tristan was the first?
Well, he and I kind of arrived around about the same time. I mean, we both have memories going back as far as being like really infants, which I think is as far back as anybody remembers, people without D.I.D. So we tend to think that we've probably both been here the whole time. We seem to remember having been here since the beginning.
So so I don't know if this is like inappropriate question. If it is, then obviously just say you don't want to answer it, and that's completely fine. Because in my mind, what I understand is that, because obviously like in the day-to-day life, you introduce yourself as Tris.
Yeah.
Right? Is Tris short for Tristan?
Yes, it is. We've used a few different legal names over the course of our life. We weren't like as aware of it at the time, but I think that decision was probably driven by the fact that we had different people and we were trying to find a name that fit. And then Tristan changed our name to his name because it really suits us. And then a friend of ours actually said, well, why don't you use Tris as your group name so you have a slightly different name for everybody? And then Tristan could just be Tristan. And that just works really well for us. We like having a name that kind of encompasses everyone but isn't quite anybody's.
Yes. Okay. And so basically Tris and Tristan were not, and this is where I may be crossing a line, so just tell me if I am. So Tris and Tristan it's not your birth name?
No.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Okay. And we won't go there. That's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah. But obviously, like, just to bring back for clarity, like today, like we're speaking with Antares.
Yes.
Which I know something that we've talked about before, but I love how all the names that you pick are almost the very sort of from like a different era, like when you say like Odin and the different names, it's very, because I'm very much into things that, I don't know the details, but I love watching things like that are a bit like fantasy.
Yeah.
Or I love also reading from like historical novel from the 13th and 14th century. And so the names, like Tristan, for example, Tristan and Isolde is the Romeo and Juliet, the first one. It's like almost like what I call the original. And then probably someone else going to correct me. There may be something from before, but Tristan and Isolde was like this impossible love story. And it's a much better story than Romeo and Juliet, in my opinion. And so your name, so when you said Tris and Tristan, I always think of like, of a very, very, very long time ago. So, you didn't choose like regular names like Julie, Claire, or Mike and Jill, Yeah. I wanted to ask you about dreams. Do you or anyone else in the system remember the dreams that you have if you dream at night?
Yeah, the way that tends to work is whoever wakes up here at the beginning of the day will remember their dreams from the night before. So we don't know exactly how it works, I guess because we were asleep at the time. But we tend to kind of work on the assumption that maybe whoever wakes up here must also sleep here, because they tend to wake up with memories of dreams that they've had, which is kind of strange.
Yeah. And how do you know that they remember? So is it because, for example, Odin will then tell his dream to Antares?
Yeah, actually, normally it's our husband. Normally we're like, gonna wake up like, I had the weirdest dream, and just like tell him, or put them in our dream journal or whatever,
Oh, and then so your husband, because we didn't say at the beginning. So Antares is married.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you wake up and you tell your husband, which I just want to clarify, this is not like within the system. It's actually a husband, like a person
Yes.
A second person completely.
Yes, a second person.
Yeah, a second person completely. So then obviously if later on Antares then is in the driving seat, he can tell Antares if Antares is asking him what Audine or someone else dreamt about.
Yeah, I mean, we normally just start the day by telling him who he's got that morning. Yeah.
So can I just ask you, so in terms of how is it for your husband? Would you say that having like having a system with different people, does that make the relationship sort of like more like it sort of stops it getting boring, or like it keeps it exciting? Or would you say it's like more work? Does he need to be more organized than any other husband? Like how does that dynamic work, the relationship dynamic?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. We could probably spend most of the interview just on that, I think. The way we tend to do it is we've always had like a really strong ethos within our system of not making Storm, that's our husband Storm, of not making him in any way responsible for us. So we always try to manage ourselves really well so that it doesn't become something he has to do. We try to kind of like keep really organized. So from that perspective, I hope it's not too much work. I'm going to say it's not. We've had to ask him prior to this interview, we were like, what would you want to say about this to the world? And he said that he actually finds it really fun and really interesting to live with different people. The way he summed it up was no matter which movie he's in the mood to watch, he knows somebody will want to watch it with him.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. Because in my mind, I was thinking it's definitely not boring. Like it's definitely got to keep it like interesting, because I find that, I mean, for me, like in relationships, my biggest fear is to feel like I'm suffocating, and maybe it's like all the same, and then we just like, you know, it just gets boring. And whereas actually with you, I can't imagine that it would get boring.
I don't think it does.
No.
Not for a moment.
So can I just ask, you have other friends with D.I.D?
Not really, actually. We have met other systems over the years, but we've never become really close friends with any of them. One or two we have, but in general, most of our friends don't have it. But they know that we do.
So I'm guessing the majority of your friends do not have D.I.D.
That's right.
That's okay. And was it also your friends when you were growing up who supported you and helped you find out what was going on?
It was. I think one of the reasons that we kind of function as well as we do and are as comfortable with having D.I.D as we are is that we were just fortunate to have some really, really good friends when we were kind of in our teenage years, which is when we were figuring it out. We just had some really close friends that we felt we could tell anything to. So, you know, once we started kind of figuring out what was happening, we just went to them and said, you know, I know this is going to sound really, really weird, but I think there's more than like one person in my mind. And, you know, to their credit, they were so open-minded and accepting of that. And to begin with, we would just not try and hide it. You know, like if a different person came out, we would just kind of say to them quite openly, this is who I am today. And then they were able to kind of feed back to us and say, you know, I do feel that I've interacted with completely different people. I don't feel like you're one person putting on personas. You seem very, very different when you switch. And again, at that point, we still didn't know what D.I.D was. We'd never heard of it. And I think having that support, even though we didn't have a name for it, just that experience of having people like, okay, this does seem to be what's going on with you, but that's okay. And I'm okay with that. I think that was really, really helpful to us.
It sounds like you're really good at surrounding yourself with good people, you know?
We've been really lucky. We've met some incredible people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not lucky. It's probably also just answers to who you are as a person, you know, because you attract, you know, like people who are like you. You know, if you weren't on the same level with them, you wouldn't hang out, you know, if you wouldn't feel something was off, you weren't comfortable. So it obviously shows that you are also quite a supportive person, which is actually part of what you're doing now in life as well in your business, which we'll circle back to a bit later. So yeah, so I mean, that's good. I mean, it's good to hear that you have like a really good group around you from quite a young age. So obviously, those were your friends, but those were not a professional, they couldn't give you a professional diagnosis of what was going on.
No.
So how was the road to find out that it was D.I.D?
We first actually heard the phrase D.I.D. I think it was around about the year 2000, I think. There's a quite well-known TV movie called Cybil, she was one of the most famous cases of it. I haven't seen the movie. I don't particularly want to. I think it would be quite upsetting for me to watch. But a friend of ours had watched it, and she started talking about this movie, this girl who'd been through these awful experiences, and she developed this condition where she became these different people. And we were just kind of sitting there going...
So is it fictional or documentary, Cybil?
It's based on a true story.
Okay.
And this was actually a co-worker of ours. And as she was talking about it, we were just kind of sitting there in shock going, oh, that's describing what we have. There's a word for it. Shock, Didn't quite know what to do with that information. So we read a little bit about it. But at that point, we didn't really feel like we needed professional help at that particular moment. And we didn't really want to tell a stranger, no matter how good of a professional they were, about it. It felt really scary to just go to a therapist and be like, hi. And then many years later, I'm talking only about 3 or 4 years ago from today, our anxiety was really, really bad. And we decided to seek therapy for that. But we realized that if we weren't able to be open about having D.I.D, we would spend most of the sessions just trying to hide it. So we thought maybe we should just be completely open about it. And we were really fortunate to get matched with a very open-minded therapist who then officially diagnosed us. But it just kind of felt like by that stage, it was already so clear that that's what we had, that we didn't really need a diagnosis. I mean, I guess it was sort of validating, but at the same time, we'd been living with each other by then, consciously living with each other by then for such a long time. It was almost like a formality, I think.
Yeah. Confirming what you already knew.
Yeah, definitely.
I just want to go back a little bit, because obviously so you then found a therapist who, like you said, was open-minded. Can you explain what you mean by that? Was it because you had other therapists before who were not willing to meet you?
Well, yes, we had quite a few experiences with that. Prior to finding this particular lady, we'd contacted quite a few therapists privately and just kind of opened the conversation and explained about, I have D.I.D, or I think I have D.I.D. And pretty much every person we spoke to before we found the lady that we eventually worked with just kind of metaphorically just shut the door in our face. We just got a lot of, I couldn't work with you. You would need too much specialist attention. We even had people say, are you on drugs? Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? And it was really, really disheartening. We went through that over one summer. And by the end of the summer, we were just like, you know what? I'm not even going to look anymore. I'm just going to figure this out. We'll just figure this out between ourselves, which we did for several years until we eventually did find someone.
Yeah, no, because this is something we spoke about earlier. This is why I was asking you that question. And because that, to me, that when you first told me that a while back, I was very surprised that, people will react this way, especially a professional. Mm. It's sort of almost like a behavior you'd expect, And obviously I can't judge. I don't know what their philosophy around it was, but what really I thought, and it was something that we spoke about in details last time, is that was that experience, obviously, when you're out there seeking support. And I know how that feels like, I've gone to therapy myself. And if I had people closing the door on me when I was at my lowest, I don't even know what I would have done. So the reason why I was asking that is because this shows someone who can inspire people in knowing that, you can really, you basically, you had your own back. You got up and just made shit work, and you didn't let it bring you down. And that's something that most people have a very hard time doing. And I'm not saying it wasn't hard, obviously, but have a really hard time being successful doing that. And second of all, that you are so open about it. And, D.I.D is, I know OCD and depression, it's very hard to come out with it and say to people that you have that. So never mind D.I.D, and you're so open about it. And that's what blows me away, and to know that also you haven't always had that support on the professional side. So yeah, I just want to say kudos to you. And we're definitely going to go into we can go into this now. What is it if you could tell someone that was going through a similar situation, whether it be D.I.D or else, and they keep getting the door shut on them, what would you say if you can, to help them get through that period that feels like hell?
I would say that even if it really, really doesn't feel like it, and I know it probably doesn't feel at all like it, they do have the strength to do this. They do have the strength to get through it, even though it probably feels like the most ridiculous thing to hear. And they would be like, no, I don't. You do. You do have more strength than you know. If you just make that commitment to be there for yourself and to treat yourself kindly, you will be amazed at what strength you can find.
So would you say it's sort of something that you sort of say to yourself, or how do you get there? Is it by action? Or because, when you're at your lowest, you're literally pinned to the bed and you can't move. You don't want to get out of bed. You just don't care, right? So how do you go from there to here?
In really, really tiny steps. Something that we talk about a lot, which I think is really important, whether you have D.I.D or whether you don't have it, is acknowledging when you're doing really well. Because I think, to give an example, I think there's this tendency, you talked about if you're having a day where it's really, really hard for you to get out of bed, and then maybe you do manage to get out of bed for 5 minutes, but then it's so easy to jump to, well, other people can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and run a marathon before breakfast and still run their business. And I think if you can...
I fucking hate those people.
And I think if you can switch from that to, okay, I got out of bed today, but for me, that was really hard. And I still did that. So that actually makes me a kick-ass. That can make so much difference, because then you're constantly giving yourself that positive reinforcement of you're doing really well and you're doing your best. And what might seem like a tiny step to somebody else, to you was like climbing a mountain, and you still did it. So just celebrate every tiny little victory and acknowledge that some days getting out of bed will be the best you can do, and maybe some days you won't even be able to do that. Maybe some days all you managed to do was stay alive throughout the day, but you still did it. So just acknowledge that. And although we were really lucky in that we could do that for one another, that is something you can do without having D.I.D. You can do that for yourself. I think that was the thing that made the biggest difference for us.
Yeah. No, do you know what? I agree with you. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this, but often whether it's depression or anxiety or just any kind of malaise that you have, in your spirit or in your mind, wherever you want to believe, but any sort of disassociation like that is usually because it's down to comparison and expectation of where you should be, right? So you were mentioning about the 5 a.m. marathon runner, before he starts breakfast. I was like, oh, hate that guy. But obviously I'm kidding when I say hate that guy, but at the same time, I'm like, why can't I get up at 5, right? But it's often when we're really, really dark and it starts spinning out of control, is because we're thinking we're not where we should be. We're comparing our life to what it should be, and we're comparing ourselves to others, right? So you're right. It's about bringing it back to yourself and going, you know what, I'm going to be my own best friend. What would if my best friend was here, what would he or she do to help me through this, And sometimes it's just metaphorically giving yourself a hug, just go make yourself a cup of tea, just do anything, just a small thing, and not compare. And there's something else that you mentioned, that remembering your own little victories as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I've actually done that this year. I was like, okay, so to planning out this year, what do I want to get out of this year? And one of the things I did was, it was an exercise from Marie Forleo, who was on one of her YouTube videos. And she mentioned about, okay, go back and say, what were the things you're proud of last year? It could be just little things, it can be big things, right? And then you go about how do you want to feel for the next year. So part of the exercise was looking back. And I think it's important because you can quickly forget. But if you have that up, I had that up on my computer, and I can just look at it whenever I feel like I need a bit of a pep talk with myself. And I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't bad. Yeah, I remember that. And so, it's just so easy to just forget. Okay. And obviously I would never compare, feeling blue with D.I.D. and, of course not. I would just say that what you were saying definitely resonates with me in that way. You just have to just focus on you and do small steps at a time.
Yeah.
In your day-to-day life, how do you introduce yourself?
We usually introduce ourselves as Tris.
Yeah.
Unless somebody already knows we have D.I.D, in which case we'll just tell them who it is.
Do people have preferences? Your friends, they go, oh, yay, it's Antares. Or they go, oh, yeah, it's Odin. Or do they say that to each of you? And and you cut on and you've told each other, yeah, they're saying the same thing.
Probably not to our face, but I think definitely people do build up deeper relationships with different people, definitely. And you can kind of like, we haven't had anybody who just didn't like one of us, thankfully, but you can kind of tell like different people, like different friends of ours, depending who introduces themselves that day, you can definitely tell that some people are like, oh, it's you. I'm so glad it's you today.
Can actually, if that's okay with you, I'd actually like to ask you when did you, I don't know, was it like whilst you were dating or was you in a relationship? Like, when did you tell your now husband that you had DID, or that you have DID, sorry?
Well, we actually met him around about the same time we first discovered the phrase. So we didn't actually know it was called DID the very beginning of our relationship. But we told him before we started dating, we were still just friends. And we were just talking one night and it was like, okay, you know, we really like this guy. We don't want to get closer, only to then tell him and him not be cool with it. So we were just like sitting in his car one night. We'd gone for a walk on the beach. We were just chilling out and we just kind of like casually dropped into conversation, like as casually as you could possibly drop something like that, you know. We were like, hey, I just need to tell you this really weird thing about me. And then we just kind of, you know, just went with, I have different people in my mind. And he was so cool about it. From the very beginning, he was just so laid back about it. He was like, oh, that's interesting. Can I meet them? Which was just the best reaction I think we could have hoped for.
Oh my God, I need to get tips on dating from you because I do not attract that kind of guy. I've got to tell you right now. I make very different choices by the sounds of it. This is great. Yeah, no, this is, were you were friends first?
Yes.
Okay. For how long?
Oh gosh, I think it was about 8 months or something. It wasn't a super long time.
So, but he had no idea. He had no idea. Like, was it always the same person showing up when you were speaking with him when you were friends?
No, it was different people. It's just that over the years, we've gotten really good at hiding that. So people don't tend to know unless they know. So yeah, he'd spoken with a few different people, but it was actually Tristan who told him the whole news.
Well, I love it. I think it's great that, I think it's just, and I think the fact also to not make a big deal of it, but just say it. I think it's worse when you make like a big deal and go, well, by the way, this is, you know, but you just like drop it as nothing and people can just receive it the way they want. Because I think, I don't know if you agree, but I mean, it was actually another guest on the podcast, Clarissa, she mentioned about how people react to the reaction of your, hang on, sorry, let me just rephrase that. So in the example here, like this is what she explained, right? So let's take this example. So for example, by the sounds of it, you are very comfortable with this system you have with D.I.D, right? This is just like you've come to love it, you've come to accept it, and it's like you've actually, we'll talk about this when we talk about your business. You've managed to turn it to your advantage, right?
Yeah.
To me, when we've spoken before, I still really understood this has actually become an asset. And I don't want to glorify or make it glamorous to have DID, because obviously I know some people have very different experience than yours. But obviously we're only talking about your experience here. And so you've managed to turn it to your advantage, like to a strength as much as you can. And so your reaction to yourself is like, well, that's what I've got. Never mind, like take it or leave it. And so because your reaction to yourself is so calm and healthy, that he could only really react in a, okay. Whereas if you really were not comfortable with it and you were weird and you hadn't really resolved it and come to a conclusion with it, like of acceptance, he wouldn't be able to have probably he would have reacted probably a different way. And that's what Clarissa mentioned. I think is very true. Like, if people make a big deal of it, it becomes a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
Actually, I want to actually talk about your business now. So as a system, how do you, because obviously, so you do copywriting and you help with branding for businesses as well.
Yeah.
And are these like personal branding, you'd say, or like companies?
More personal. It's more like helping people tell their stories and kind of like find the beauty in their own stories so they can then share it. So
can you tell me a little bit how you do it with your system on the job? How you delegate the work and how it all happens?
Yeah, that's a really big topic, actually. Wow. We have different skills. I think that's one thing that's kind of really important to know, to understand how we run our business. We don't all have the same skill set. It's not like the Matrix, like I know Kung Fu, we can't just like plug in a module and just know things. So that's really influenced how we run our business, because Tristan can write really, really well. Auden and Quilo can write very well, although their styles are different. I'm not so good with the writing, but I'm really good at talking to people, which is why I'm here today. We have other people who are like better at web design or better at organisation. So it's kind of a case of every day just having this like really strong awareness of what do we need to do today? What are we working on? For God's sake, have a to-do list, because I think we would be sunk without that. So everybody can check it. And then just kind of just making sure that the right people do the right things. I do want to mention here that we are really kind of privileged in that we have got to the point where we can choose to switch with one another. That's not something that every system can do. That's something we've had to work really, really hard on since we were about 15. And we do use that. Now we've got that skill, which took us like literally about 20 years to get. We do use that to our advantage, where we can just be like, okay, next we need to write this particular thing. I know Auden's been working on that particular thing, so let's just get him to come and carry on. So actually, now I'm talking about it, or there's a certain amount of bossing each other around. There's a certain amount of you come here and do this, and you come here and do that.
So you can actually bring different drivers to the cars, to the wheel, right? To the driving seats.
Yes, we can now. I said, it took us about 20 years to learn to do it, but we can do it now, which is, I think, the most important thing we've learned in terms of running a business. And I've got no doubt it's part of what allows us to run it as well as we do, because we can make that decision.
That's so interesting, because obviously that's not something that's common from what I can hear from you. It's not something that's common with other people with D.I.D, that they can't always control who's driving the car.
No, I think it's quite unusual to have that level of control. I think we're quite unusual in being able to do that. But then it wasn't an accident. We knew we needed to be able to do that to feel like we have more control of our lives, because we weren't obviously running a business 20 years ago, but we just wanted more of a sense of control. So we started working on being able to control that aspect of it.
So did it come about by communicating with each other and going, listen, we need to sort this out because it's getting out of control?
Yeah. And, D.I.D is always a journey, as I guess all of life is. And, sometimes you would switch but not quite realize we'd done it. Or, to use a car analogy, there would be somebody else in the passenger seats. Maybe you'd be picking up on some of their feelings. So it's not always cut and dry, but we've kind of gradually got to the point where we can decide. It was mostly just communication. Like if we knew a particular song or something tended to like trigger someone to come forward, we would like deliberately play that song to encourage them to come forward. So we just worked on it really hard and really slowly over a period of time. We didn't push ourselves. I think that's important to say, because it's important with D.I.D to not force yourself to do things like that, because you could damage yourself, because you've already been through a lot. You don't want to kind of like be trying to force yourself to do things, but just like as and when it felt right, it didn't feel super stressful. We would just practice. We would just kind of practice learning to switch with each other. Obviously, there were lots of outtakes, lots of bloopers where it just didn't work. But gradually we got there. And once we started running our business, we quickly realized that was a superpower we were really going to need to use.
Listen, I mean, kudos to you. I mean, you said that sometimes there's bloopers, but sometimes, even for myself, let's say if I go and have an interview, if I go and meet someone, or I go on a date, and I'm like, I'm going to be very cool and chill, and I'm like totally awkward. So and that's just one person. So the fact that, so it's, one person has their own bloopers as well, or how do you say bloopers?
Bloopers.
Was that how you call it? And you know what I mean, like missteps or whatever. So when there's a few of you, it's pretty understanding. Now I know you've got a new website now, but so I don't know if do you also still have where you mentioned your D.I.D?
Oh yeah, once we launched the new website, we're just going to tell our story in pretty much the same way. What
made you decide to do that, to bring that to the forefront on your website?
I think it kind of came about because a lot of our work with copywriting, it was like people would come to us for copywriting, and what they would end up with was all these kind of very uplifting lectures on how they should be totally themselves in business, because if you're totally yourself, then the right people will resonate with you. And it felt like we were asking a lot of them in a way, because although that's really beautiful and it's a wonderful thing to do in business, we were also asking people to like tell us their stories and their fears, and it felt like a lot of trust there. And it started to have this feeling of like, okay, these people are coming to us and they're being so open and so honest and so trusting and sharing so much of their hearts, and we're just hiding all of this. And it just felt imbalanced somewhere. Like we were asking them to do something that we weren't giving back, and it didn't feel right. So we just had this discussion. Some of us were more keen to share our story than others. We waited until everybody who is like in the driver's seat on a regular basis was comfortable with it. And once we got to that point where everybody was like, okay, I agree this is something we should do, we just put it out there. And, you know, we didn't necessarily announce it to all of our existing customers. We weren't like emailing them going, hey, guess what? But it was just there then. It was just there for people to see if they wanted to. And it just felt more balanced because we were then, I guess you could say we were practicing what we were preaching.
Yeah.
You know, we were being as open and as honest and as truthful as we were encouraging other people to be.
Yes. Yeah. No, especially when you help people tell their own, because if you're dealing with, personal brands, like for example, for me, my business is a personal brand, and part of it is being truthful, but you can choose what you say. You don't have to say everything, but what's on there has to feel like, yeah, this is me. I can stand by that. And so obviously when you're asking that of people, I can understand that you feel like you want to have that same level of integrity.
Definitely.
And go on, sorry.
So I was just going to say, I think for our own purposes as well, before we started doing that, when you've got D.I.D and you're navigating the world with it, you kind of, even without really consciously making the decision, you sort of end up building up like a persona that you're almost in a habit to interact with the world, like this persona of who you all are, like pretending to be like the one person that the world thinks it's interacting with. And that can feel really stifling. So it's partly for us as well that we just didn't want to feel that stifled anymore. We just kind of thought, well, not only is this going to be better for like how we relate to people and in terms of doing what we're asking them to do, it's also going to feel better to us because we won't feel stifled. We won't feel like we've got to pretend to be something we're not. Even though it doesn't really come up in conversation with our clients a lot, it's like the underlying energy was there of always hiding, which just didn't seem like a healthy energy to bring into our business. So we just decided to go out there and be honest about it. And we just figured that the right people would resonate with us, and people who were kind of put off by our story were not right for us and would go their own way.
Yeah. What has been people's response like to when they land on your website and they see, like on the business end, so not the friends around you, but on the business side of thing, what has been the general response?
It's been really positive. It kind of ranges. Some people have mentioned that they've read our About page, but they don't feel the need to talk about it anymore. And that's absolutely fine because obviously they're not here to talk about our D.I.D. They're here to work with us. So that's totally cool. And that's a great response.
Yeah.
Other people do kind of want to talk about it a little bit because they think it's really interesting. And we've had a couple of people who actually want to know who's been writing their copy for them, like which person are they dealing with. And that, when it happens, can be really fun as well because then they kind of know which team member they're talking to, and that can be really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, it takes working on a project with you to a whole different level. It's
definitely.
Yeah. Can I ask you how many of you there are?
Oh, like on a kind of daily basis, like just driving the car, there's kind of around about 10 people that come out regularly. On the inside, there's more like kind of about 100 people. We're a really big system.
What?
Obviously all those people do not come out, but they might sometimes. I mean, sometimes they will just kind of like drop in and say hi, but some of them never take the driving seat, or like maybe once every 3 years they just like pop out randomly and surprise us. That happens.
So this is going to sound like maybe like an odd question, but I mean, how do you get peace? Because I mean, that sounds like a lot of people. I like to have me time. Like, I don't know, do you get like alone time? Do you need alone time?
We can, if we want to. We can choose to just like put up a little screen and just be like, I'm not talking to you bastards today, We can do that. It does happen sometimes where we're just like, put up a little screen and just kind of like, just be here in the driving seat, either on our own or with Storm, and just have some alone time. It doesn't happen a lot because obviously I think on some level we're all the same soul. So we don't tend to feel like we need to get away from each other. But it is nice to have some time where you're not like talking to 5 other people, where you're just, talking to yourself. That can be really, really refreshing. So
when you, because I was just going to say, obviously, if there's one person driving the car, what I'm going to call like the car as an analogy, one person driving the car, then actually it's not crowded. But actually, now you've just mentioned that sometimes you could be talking to the others whilst you're driving the car, or the system, so to speak. So you never really and you're never alone at any one time, any of you?
If we choose to be, we can like make that very conscious decision to be. But usually, if there's someone driving the car, which of course there always is, as long as we're awake, then there's usually at least one other person, kind of like in the passenger seat or in the back seat, just kind of like joining in on what's going on, or like talking to you. I mean, sometimes somebody can make you laugh in public, and then you kind of have to hide it so you don't look like a strange person laughing by themselves. So we like talk to each other and joke with each other and tease each other and help each other out as well. Like if we're working on a project, we do some work for a client, if one of us is maybe a little bit stuck and the copy's not flowing right, then we can just be like, hey, have you got any ideas? Because I'm stuck.
This is so interesting, because that's the kind of thing that I would need to pay someone to ask help on, or to, most of us have to go, hey, can I just like hire you for like an hour? Or you've got someone in the back seat. So can I just ask, I've just realized I haven't asked you this, and I have no idea. So let's say like as Antares, like you're driving the car now.
Yeah.
And there's like, let's say there's a person with you. How do you know there's another person there with you? Is it because you hear them? How does it work? How do you know there's another person there?
Usually we get like a really clear mental image, almost like, I guess you'd say in your mind's eye, we can just kind of almost mentally see the other person. So we know they're there because of that. That's the most usual way, but less frequently is because you'll suddenly hear them, which if you're not expecting, it can be very surprising.
And do they each have their own voice?
Yes.
Okay. So know who's talking. You don't have to guess.
Yeah, exactly. You know straight away, because we've been doing this for so long now that we know each other really well. So it's kind of like if you picked up the telephone and it was a really good friend, you would just know it was them.
Yeah,
it's a little bit like that.
But so the mental image is literally, you can sort of see them in your mind's eyes. It's not like you can see them sat on the sofa across of you. You can just see them in your mind.
Yes, although that would be cool, but that would be awesome if we could do that. No, we just see them in our mind's eye because, obviously at the front, you're driving the car. We don't suddenly like grow 2 inches or change our hair color. But on the inside, we all look completely different. So we recognize each other.
So this is actually a really good segue into what they say in the media. Okay. So, because you mentioned about the hair or change the clothes. Because we spoke about like the series called The United States of Terror. And so I kind of wanted for you to come up there to let me know, like, in your opinion, sort of what's nonsense and what's accurate and what they say in the media, whether it's film or the papers. So we can start off with The United States of Terror, which she has the D.I.D, but each personality comes up and has their own outfits and their own voice. Like she actually physically changes. Is that something that some people with the D.I.D experience, or would you say that's done for Hollywood?
I think there's 2 aspects to that. I think the clothes aspect, I can't speak for other systems, but I haven't come across many systems that will just change clothes when they switch. I'm not saying it's never happened, and I'm not judging it if it does happen. I think most people don't do that. Like, it's more common that whoever's kind of in the driving seat when you're getting dressed will just put on what they want to wear. It might be different for other systems. I think that was probably done to give like a visual clue for the viewer, which I can totally understand why they would need to do that. So the viewer would kind of have a much clearer sense of who each person was, which I guess in that sense could be quite a positive thing in for the show. With the different voices though, that can be quite common. I do know for quite a lot of systems, the voices will change. Not that I'm going to, because that would be kind of a weird party trick. But if I had to switch with Tristan just now, his voice is not as low as mine, and it's not kind of as vocal fry-ish. In the past, we have had people with different accents, though we don't seem to have them now. Some people speak faster or slower. They have like different cadences, and that is quite common with systems. So I think that was quite an accurate thing.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay. Is there anything that you'd say that you see out there in the media and you go, that's not true, or that's nonsense? So what are the fake opinions out there, would you say?
Oh God, there's so many. I think the biggest one that I have to mention, and I'm sorry if I start ranting at you, is the idea that people with D.I.D are dangerous. This idea that there's like this, they call it like this serial killer alter, like you're just sneaking off and murdering people in the night, but you don't know it. That kind of trope comes up a lot. I don't know if you're aware, recently there was a movie called Split, which The villain in Split actually has D.I.D, and I haven't seen the movie, but from what I understand, towards the end of the movie, he kind of uncovers this kind of super headmate who's like this monster. That upset the D.I.D community really deeply because it's demonizing it and it's making you like a monster. There's often kind of like split personality stories like Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, that's a phrase people use quite often in everyday life, like, oh, they're Jekyll and Hyde. So there's a lot out there that makes it seem like it's really dangerous. There's a lot out there that one of the biggest myths, I think, is that if you have D.I.D, you can't possibly communicate with each other. And that can be true, especially when systems are first learning that they have it. But many systems do learn to communicate with one another. And that's quite, obviously that's a really healing and a beneficial thing to learn to do. But the media tends to portray it very much as like, you'll never know you've got it. And you'll just be out there like murdering people and you'll never know you're doing it because of D.I.D. And that is really frustrating because it has real world implications. People, when they come out, will actually get asked, are you dangerous? I've been asked it. We've had people say, are you dangerous? Are you going to hurt me? I don't think I can talk to you anymore. I can't trust you anymore. And I know we're not alone in those experiences. So
in terms of like, if someone had no idea about the idea and it's interesting that people ask, if you are dangerous, because I think if you're really dangerous, you'd never say it. I mean, it's a bit like, it's a non-question, if that makes sense. It's like, it's like I said, it's like if you're dating and you ask someone, are you cheating? Are you expecting them to say, it's just, do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes asking the question are not going to give you the answers. You can only get the answers by getting to know someone. And that's how trust is built. Because honestly, I can go out on a Friday night, talk to someone at a bar. He may be a serial killer. I don't know. So it's like, I'm not going to ask every person. So it's an odd question to even ask. But at the same time, I don't know if it's obviously cruel to receive that question, to hear that question. At the same time, I don't know if it's done if it's candid, like maybe, if someone had really genuinely wanted to know because they only saw it in the media, how would you feel if someone asked you that genuinely and said, okay, are you dangerous? Would you rather them ask you or would you rather them to get to know you?
It depends on the circumstance. When I mentioned that I'd had that question myself, it was actually from people I'd known for quite a long time before coming out to them. So, one would hope they already knew I wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that when they hear dissociative identity disorder, their brain just jumps to that, even if they already know you quite well. I think if somebody asked that, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to hear, and it's difficult to have somebody even think that you might just be really dangerous. But I do understand if they haven't come across D.I.D before outside of like movies like Split, then that might be what they think it is. So I can understand that they might need to ask. I guess the best thing that as a person living openly with it can do is just to be honest and take that opportunity to maybe just dispel some of the myths around it. In an ideal world, though, I think I would rather they just kind of were willing to get to know me and not make that assumption.
Yeah.
Because as you said, somebody without D.I.D is just as likely to be dangerous, and we don't go around asking them.
No. Yeah. And everyone has the potential to be loving and not, we all have everything in us. So it's a bit of a non-question. Is there anything else you'd like to say to sort of like bust the myth on D.I.D?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a moment ago just this idea that you can't possibly know that you have it. I think that's a really big myth that I would like to see die, to be honest, because obviously you can know you have it and you can communicate with one another. I think the other big myth is that the only way to...
So is the myth that people think that you can be unaware that you have it?
Yeah, there's kind of a big myth out there that people that have D.I.D don't know they have D.I.D, which is obviously completely false because people with it usually do know they have it. And there's definitely a myth out there that the way it presents is going to be like this one person having these blackouts and then waking up and something terrible's happened and they don't know why. I'm not saying that's never happened to systems. I'm absolutely certain it has. But people can learn to communicate. They can learn to understand their headmates. They can learn to talk with them. And there's a lot of myths out there that say that's not possible, which makes it quite difficult for people who have learned to do it, because then people think, oh no, you can't have done that. You must be faking. You must be making it up. You can't possibly talk to one another. But, we can. It's pretty common.
I think it's like, you want to sort of remove the idea of generalization. Like, if someone, I don't know, I always go back to examples of dating, but So it's a bit like saying that, let's say if you, in the past relationship, a person cheated on you, doesn't mean that everyone cheats. So it's a bit like the thing with the D.I.D, like when they're saying about the blackouts, you say like, yeah, it may have happened to some people, but it doesn't mean that it's everyone. You can't just paint everyone on the same brush, right?
Exactly, because every system experiences it very differently, you know, and the only person that they can really speak for is themselves.
Yeah. And you said there was another myth you wanted to...
Yeah, the other one is that the only way to get, I guess, better, for want of a nicer way of saying it, with D.I.D is to integrate and all become one person again. For some systems, that's absolutely right, and that is absolutely the way for them to heal. That's not a bad thing at all. But I think there is a certain myth out there that it's the only way, that you can only thrive by deciding to integrate and become one person.
So I just want to explain, because maybe some people are not familiar with what you just said. So in layman terms, it means that to basically fuse all of the different people in the system as one person.
Yes. Yeah.
So to actually not having multiple people, but just one.
Exactly. Okay. And, you know, for some systems, that is the right path for them, which is obviously awesome if that's what they need to do. But I think there is a certain myth that it's the only way for every system. And I think that's not really helpful, because for some systems, that's not what they need to do. Some systems just need to learn to communicate with each other better. But they don't need to become one person. Some systems feel that it wouldn't be possible for them to become one person, or they wouldn't like it, or it would just take so much intense work that it's just not the right path for them. Obviously, that's not the path that we've chosen. Yeah, so that's a myth that I think is a little bit damaging sometimes. I know that when we come out with D.I.D, one of the most common questions we get after, are you dangerous? Now you're going to kill me in my sleep. After that, the most common question we get is, are you going to become one person?
People ask that?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Oh, my goodness, all the time.
Seriously, sometimes people crack me up with that. I mean, I have, you know, we both know her. I think you know her as well. But I have a friend, Jen. She's got CF, and the amount of stupid things people, I mean, it's not stupid, it's just people just don't know better. And also all the myths around it. And you're like, oh my God, do people really say this to you? But yeah, they do. And I guess, you know, you have to, in a way, you have to let people express themselves. But I think when you're on the receiving end, it's like, it gets boring real quick, right? At some point.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and also I guess it's assuming that the only way to be at peace and happy is to be one person, and that's very presumptive. What's the word? You know, presumptive, is that the word? Yeah. You can. It's assuming, let's say, however I feel my happiness, that should be the same for you, and that's not. I disagree with that. I think if that's how you feel happy, and if that's how you've come to, because actually, the way I see when we've spoken before, is that actually the system that you have now with the different people is actually a new equilibrium for you. So,
yes, definitely.
Right. So like we mentioned earlier, is that the idea are usually caused by trauma. So trauma brings about an imbalance, right? So you have to go and find a way to cope, and it has been your way to cope. So this is your new balance. This is your equilibrium. And to then go and say you have to change it again, that's something that should be down to you only, and wouldn't always mean that that's actually a good thing to do. So, and it's a lot to do also with society. I don't know. I mean, this is maybe going a bit off topic, but I remember I was a teenager at the time. My mom took me to this seminar, and it was this Native American doctor, and he was holding a talk about medicine. But he actually brought a point. He said that I hope I remember this correctly. So if I'm wrong, just let me know. For him, and so in his culture, that smoking the pipe was to be able to get these, I don't know if they call them hallucination, but it's because that's sort of like, it's a very spiritual, divine thing. And I'm probably misquoting him completely, but it was seen as a positive thing. And in his culture, if someone has that naturally, that's a blessing. And he said, but here in the West, you put those people in an institute. So what we see as a disease over there is a blessing, right? And he was making other parallels the reason why I'm saying this is that someone who says, well, for you to be healthy, that you need to be back as one person and get rid of the system is just a point of view.
Absolutely.
Just an angle. And you just don't know what's actually happy, what's normal. All of those are just opinions and they're just point of views. I think as long as we are not out there harming people on purpose and being malicious, then we've got to do what's best for us. You just got to do you, right?
And I loved what you said about how in certain cultures things would be seen differently, whereas here they might be seen as like an illness. Because I think part of our philosophy has always been that we haven't treated D.I.D like an illness that we have. We've just treated it as that's how we are. We're just, most people have one person in mind and we happen to have a bunch. And I think that came through when we were talking earlier about blackouts. We don't really think of it as blackouts. We don't kind of go, oh my God, I blacked out and then somebody else did something, We just kind of take it in stride and kind of just try to have like a really good sense of humor about it, rather than make it into a really frightening thing. It'd just be like, oh, we have shoes that I don't remember buying. Well, that's kind of cool,
Yeah.
We just kind of try and take a really light-hearted attitude towards it.
Yeah, and I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was more than just an attitude or a mindset. You also went and actually did something about it, which is communicating internally and trusting each other, which happened because you're communicating. So there's no surprises. I'm sure there's not all of a sudden a client go, hey, what was that copy? What was that? You sort of know, communicating with each other. So that's how you build trust as well over time. So you've actually worked on this, but obviously it started with an attitude, different attitude. Yeah.
Definitely.
I gotta say, I'm just really, really happy to have this conversation with you, because I think it's important to not make what's perceived as mental illness. I don't even like that word, but what's perceived as mental illness, whether it's like OCD or D.I.D, depression, anxiety, and so on. I think it's important to be able to, if you can, to turn it as a strength like you did, and to be so open and transparent about it is definitely something that I admire a lot, because it's definitely, for me in the past, when I've had, depression, anxiety, I haven't been open about it. I definitely don't talk to people about it. Obviously, I've mentioned it here, but I feel also because you're being so open about it, and it's sort of also why I've got you on, is because you're so open about it. And I think it's a great attitude, because making it so taboo makes it harder for people and more isolated, and it only makes their situation worse, right?
Absolutely. It's another one of the reasons that we are open about it, because like today we talked mostly about D.I.D because that's kind of what we were here to talk about. But we do also have PTSD, depression, anxiety, and we do talk openly about those as well.
Yeah.
Both in a personal and in a business context, because it kind of starts the conversation and it creates a safe space for other people to then talk about their experiences. And once you start doing that kind of that loneliness goes. And I think that it's so damaging, and it kind of adds to the suffering you're already experiencing when you have one of these things, that when you also feel like really isolated because of it. And that's another reason for being so open, is just to hopefully give other people that safe space where they feel they can also talk about their experiences and know that they're not alone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I also know that people's reactions, sometimes people's reaction, how they remember someone because of what they told them, it's just on them, and maybe it's just, you just don't want to be remembered as, the person who's depressed or have this or have that. But I think it's funny, because when I hear you talk, I don't see it as, oh, the person with D.I.D. I just see it like this person who's just really strong and just really turns shit around, like big time. Yeah. And you're definitely like very posed, and you sound very healthy to me, like you're just regular person. I mean, not regular, because most regular people are probably not this posed. I don't know. So let me just see. Yeah, if you don't mind, I just want to quote something you told me when we first met. I really love this. So I'm going to say I, but obviously I'm quoting you. So this is you. If I can find a way to make this work for me, you can do it too. And if we can learn to love all of our personalities, you can learn to love your one personality.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because a lot of us go around wishing we were someone else or something different. We wish we all beat ourselves up. And actually, like, if you've managed to learn all of you, your whole system, and accept it and just move forward in the world, then yeah, I think we can definitely learn to love our one person. And I think that is so important.
Oh, me too. I think that's so, so important. Yeah.
So I think definitely we're gonna let people know like where they can find you in a little bit. But is there anything that you'd like to add or want someone to, what would you like people to take away from this?
I think the main thing that I really want people to take away from this, there's two things. I'm going to cheat and give you two things.
That's okay. Cheat as much as you want.
I think from a perspective of just like for anybody listening, no matter where they are in life, is it is possible to learn to love and accept who you are, even the difficult parts or the parts in your past that were hard. There's a beautiful quote from a novel called The Perks of Being a Wallflower that says, you can't choose where you came from, but you can choose where you go from here. I probably paraphrased that slightly, but that's the gist of it. And that's kind of what I would want people to take away. You can learn to love who you are. You can make that decision of how you're going to feel. It's not easy. I don't like these gurus who kind of go, oh, you just choose your feelings. No, it's not that easy. But you can keep trying to make that choice over and over of how you're going to treat yourself and how you're going to talk to yourself and how you're going to feel about yourself. And if you just keep sticking with that, it will eventually start to change things for you, and it's possible. My second thing was, I guess, a lot more business focused, is you can find a way to make your business feel right for you. Because, I know when we first started our business, we've seen all these people out there and they're like, hustle, 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 and laptop on the beach, and the whole kind of thing. And we were kind of going, this is not going to happen for us. We're still like having to leave each other notes everywhere and run a business with D.I.D is retiring. I don't want to work from a laptop on the beach. I just want to go to bed at the end of the day. So we really had to learn how to make business work in a way that was for us and that was at the right pace for us and that acknowledged like our needs and what we were capable of. And I kind of just want to let people know that they can do that too. Like, you don't have to hustle all the time. You don't have to do things that feel wrong. You don't have to wear yourself out. You can design the way you run your business to be really, really right for you. And your life will just be so much easier when you do that.
Yeah. I don't know if you're going to like this, but I've just realized something is that what you just said now with the business and everything that's sort of like from the interview, you actually embody the feminine, how, because the feminine energy, the way I talk about feminine energy, what I mean by this is that it's sort of accepting going from a place of like just from within and then live your life from there, not forcing by, the hustle, gotta be the life, the laptop on the beach and all of that stuff. You just want to actually I just want to go to bed at the end of the day. I just need to make this work. I don't want to like tire myself out, but I want, is to do it from a place that's so peaceful inside that you just move forward with that. And that's actually being truthful with yourself, right? And that's a very feminine quality. Masculine is out there, getting stuff done. Gotta go out to war. So I'm simplifying it a lot, but you know what I'm saying.
I do.
Yeah. So, and in a way, like almost like I know, some of the people in the system are male, some are female, but there's quite a few males from what I can hear, and it makes sense because they're sort of protecting the feminine energy. They're protecting you being able to be in your feminine, right?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I did laugh when you said that because you're right. Most of the people in our system are actually men, and all of the people who drive, the people who take driver's seat are exclusively men. So that was actually really funny. But of course, like obviously, masculine, feminine energy belong to everybody, and I know that, but it did kind of strike me as kind of ironic. But yeah, totally, I feel that is where we're coming from.
To me, it makes total sense because this was a coping mechanism, and so you have the men to protect you. They're your protector, and so you can be at ease in your feminine and live your life going forward. Yeah,
definitely.
There you go. Yeah, no, I think I love that. Please tell us where we can find you.
Yes, we're just relaunched our site at the moment, so you can find us at www.yourheroheart.com.
Perfect. Okay, well, look, I just want to say a big thank you for today, Antares. Thank you for being so open with me. And yeah, thank you so much for today.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe on iTunes or anywhere else you listen to podcasts from. Drop me questions or any topics you'd like me to cover next time. Please send me a message. You can easily find me on angie-s.com. So that's angies.com, spelled angie-s.com. Come and join me on the website or find me on Instagram at The Health Lifestylist. All the links are in the show notes. And until then,
using health in a proper way.